sacred, and only like the highest ranking of like the people or whatever you would call it were able to like visit and like go and walk on those mountains. So like we had to like tour around them. Groups of pilgrims are members of a KOU, an organization of believers, and there are a number of these throughout Japan. It has been explained to me that the emphasis of the Mount Ondake religion is not dogma, but rather practice. As I was sitting quite close to 3 or 4 of these pilgrims, I heard them discussing an incident that had been taken place long ago, and before long they noticed my interest and were happy to include me in the conversation. It seemed that during the spring planting season, Sandy, young hard-working man, had not returned to his house in the night, and as there was no signs of him for 2 or 3 days, the villagers were alarmed and sent search parties out into the mountains and fields, but without results. Their judgment was that this was likely a case of kamikakushi, kamikakushi, wait, kamikakushi, 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 when an individual, often a child, is taken away by a god or a tengu, a long-nosed goblin that is often a mischief maker. Oddly enough, a few days later, the younger sister of the man went out into the mulberry grove behind their house and found him there in a sort of stubborn, emaciated, and with hair that had turned completely white. He had no memory of where he had been or of what had happened to him. The astonished villagers were now absolutely sure that this had been a case of kamikakushi, and the kamikakushi is like a spirit. I said spirit away, mysterious disappearance or death. So like they were taken mysteriously or like killed by something, by like a spirit. As the conversation went on, the man who was telling this story looked over at me from time to time and must have noticed that my face betrayed some skepticism. He turned to me with a kind smile and said, "You know, Westerners are much too rational. You must think that everything in this world can be scientifically proven, but there are worlds that we cannot see, and spirits and gods that live among us that only show themselves to us from time to time. You cannot imagine how foxes and badgers can have magical powers, but we Japanese have witnessed these things since ancient times. Perhaps you may experience some of those while you are out here in the Kyushu area." With that, our train pulled into the station. We all made polite bows and carried on with our individual journeys. I have sometimes been asked, where should I go to see the real Japan? This is a reasonable question, especially considering the amount of travel, time, and expenditure involved, and it is perhaps far more reasonable than asking where one might go to see the real America. New York, Boston, New Orleans, San Francisco, Dubuque, all of them are quite different, and all of them are quite American. But the broad alternatives in Japan, I think, are more limited. On the one hand, there are the large urban centers of Tokyo, Osaka, and to a lesser degree, Kyoto. In any of these places, you can check into a comfortable hotel. Very likely, the concierge and others at the hotel will speak English and will arrange for a taxi or a bus service. You will be dropped off at a famous temple or shrine or garden where you can see one of the city's main attractions and take a lot of interesting photos to show your friends when you go home. This is one way of experiencing Japan. It is a fun and interesting one. I would suggest, however, that the alternative, going rural, will give the visitors an experience for more in-depth of this unique country in the countryside. You will find no 5-star hotels, but instead traditional inns that may have been established centuries ago. You will not be sleeping in a bed as you would in an urban hotel, but rather on a Japanese futon on a tatami floor, just as comfortable and the way Japanese have slept for over 1,000 years. In of sushi or kobe beef. You will dine on local traditional meals of in-season vegetables, herbs, and rivers fish. And rather than the shower provided by most hotels, you will be treated by a typical Japanese bath in which you can soak as long as you like. Rural villages in Japanese also have their share of temples, shrines, and gardens, and though perhaps not defined by famous architects, they have a strong simply recount an amusing or scary event that took place in the local village at one time. But at the very heart of every traditional tale is a remembrance. Each story is this collection with the expectation of a few dating from the earlier collections. What is the difference between traditional tales and folk tales? How is it that folk tales are like animals and traditional tales are like plants? Folk tales go about here and there, but no matter where they go, they are perceived as having the same form or face. Traditional tales set their roots down to grow in one locality and always grow up in that place. Sparrows are field buntings all have the same faces, but plum trees and the camellia trees by tree are different in shape, and thus are seen and remembered individually. Many of the cute little birds of folk tales make their nests in the middle of the forest and thickets of traditional tales. But at the same time, the highlight fragrant seeds and the pollen of various traditional tales are carried off far away as well. The strength of plants to flourish and grow strong is hidden in the land's earth and water, and in the brilliance of the sun. History puts these to use, just as in cultivating the soil in agriculture. If one regulates the tillage of history, it is natural that the traditional tales of mountains and fields are restricted in form. Nihon no Densetsu. Densetsu then provides an interesting complement, like or stay in the traditional Japanese countryside. Take a small look and deep involved their memories and feelings of who they really are. The foreign tourist can do the same from an outsider's view and bolster his understandings by reading a number of traditional stories before covering up under his futon for the night, or while taking a break from the day's walk. Although they may not be like the ones included in this book, every village or town will have its own collection of stories, if not printed, then imprinted deep within the local inhabitants' minds from the time they were children. As Nishimoto Kisugi wrote, behind every sad or scary or just interesting story there are hidden principles that we cannot overlook. The very essence of Densetsu is a deep psychological truth that cannot be understood rationally. Evolved over a long period of time. When it said Kisugi, it just reminded me of the 12 Kisugi from Demon Slayer. I don't know. It should be emphasized that the existence of the cast of characters appearing in these stories, ghosts, spirits, semi-supernatural animals, and etc., is not entirely denied by modern Japanese. Even in large urban areas, the farmers who see a fox on the edge of the rice field in the evening may more be inclined to think of it as a messenger of Inari, the god of fertility, rather than just a wild animal looking for a juicy mouse for dinner. And the lone shabby priest encountering in the mountains, or even in a big city, may be given a wide berth, as he could be a Tengu in disguise. Once in a park in Nagoya, the third largest city in Japan, a very modern Japanese companion identified two fluttering yellow butterflies as possibly spirits of the dead. And one spring, when I woke to find a large black snake in my kitchen, my landlady informed me that it was likely the Nushia sort of spirit master of the area and was to be considered good luck. I admit to being happy enough as it slithered away. She had broken up all of them off. The tree started to wither. Strangely enough, when it had withered away completely, the ghost no longer appeared. Soon after, the samurai passed away. The talking futon. The talking futon. A long time ago, in a town in Tatori Prefecture, there was a small inn. One winter night, when one of the guests at the inn was sleeping, he suddenly woke up at midnight to the sound of human voices. Elder brother, you must be cold. Little brother, you must be cold. The voices were those of whispering children. Well now, where would children be at this hour? The guest wondered. There's not supposed to be anyone else in the room. Crawling out from under his futon, the guest peeped out into the next door room to see what was going on, but it was completely quiet, and not a sound could be heard. That's strange, she thought. I'm sure I heard something. The man got back under his futon once again and tried to go to sleep, but this time he heard the voice quite clearly, right next to his ear. Elder brother, you must be cold. Younger brother, you must be cold. The guest was shocked and leapt to his feet. He hurriedly lit a lamp, but there was no one else in the room. All he could hear was the sound of his own heart beating, beating, beating. With the lamp still glowing, the guest lay down on his side, and once again came the sad whispering voices. Elder brother, you must be cold. Little brother, you must be cold. Somehow the voices seemed to be coming from right inside the futon. The man shuddered in horror and brushed away the futon in panic, and nearly falling over himself, leapt out of the room, running into the innkeeper. What foolishness is this? You are probably just having a dream, the innkeeper exclaimed. No matter how the guests complained the situation, the innkeeper refused to believe it. On the contrary, he got angry. Let's not drag this out any longer. Do me the favor of getting out of here, and with that he drove the guests from the inn. The next night, however, a different guest, staying in the same room, also ran off at midnight, telling the same story. This is something strange, the innkeeper thought. Could this be a ghost? The innkeeper went into the room himself and sat next to the futon for a while. Eventually, from the futon cover, sad voices began whispering, Elder brother, you must be cold. Little brother, you must be cold. The innkeeper turned pale and ran from the room. What an eerie futon, he thought. What kind of terrible shop would sell a futon like this? The next day, the innkeeper went to the used furniture store where he had bought the futon to make a complaint. There, he heard the sad story. At the outskirts of town, in the same prefecture of Totori, there had lived a poor family of four. Some days before, after a long illness, the father had died in his sleep, and soon after, the mother had also passed away. This left only an elder brother 6 years old and a younger brother of 4. Having no relative to care for them, the brothers went day after day with nothing to eat and shivered from the cold and empty stomachs under a single futon. Elder brother, he must be cold. The affectionate younger brother would try to pull the futon over his older brother. Little brother, you must be cold. The older brother would put the futon over his little brother. But the cold-hearted landlord finally took the futon in place of the friend, and drove the children from the house. The 2 boys, who had had nothing to eat for days, could not even walk. That night, as snow fell, they held each other in the arms under the cave of a nearby house and froze to death. When the people of the town found out about this, they pitied the 2 boys and laid them to rest in the nearby temple dedicated to Canaan. Is this what